the state are exhausting every option to find 25-year-old Sydney Sutherland.
We're working every aspect that we can think of.
According to Jackson County Sheriff David Lucas, Sutherland was last seen around 2:30 on this county road near her home.
A young nurse goes for a run on a sunny afternoon in her quiet Arkansas hometown. She's healthy, happy, and just back from vacation. Within hours, she vanishes without a sound, without a trace. Her family is frantic. The town mobilizes. And when the truth comes out, it doesn't just break hearts. It destroys trust. Because the man responsible wasn't a stranger. He was one of them. This isn't just the story of Sydney Sutherland's murder. It's a story about evil hiding in plain sight.
Welcome to Dark Chronicles, where shadows hide the truth.
On August 19th, Sydney laced up her shoes for a jog. She'd already been to the gym that morning, but running was her thing. It cleared her mind. She lived with her boyfriend Alex. He was home that day. Around 2:30 p.m., a UPS driver saw Sydney jogging along State Highway 18. That was the last confirmed sighting. Hours passed, no texts, no calls, no Snapchats. Alex called her mom, Maggie. She hadn't heard from her either. Panic set in quickly. Sydney was the kind of person who never went dark, never went off the grid. Within hours, the police were involved. By dawn the next morning, the search was massive. Local sheriff's deputies, state police, U.S. Marshals, even the FBI. Hundreds of volunteers. They searched roads, ditches, fields. Drones flew overhead. People knocked on doors. Her phone had last pinged less than a quarter mile from home. And then on August 20th, her phone was found. That's when the feeling shifted. This wasn't just a missing person case, this was something darker. The search intensified. A farmer named Quake Llewellyn, someone Sydney had gone to school with, told Maggie that he'd seen Sydney jogging, said she looked fine, that no one was following her. He gave Maggie a hug. Something about it didn't sit right. She would later say something felt off. But at the time, he was just another concerned neighbor, someone trying to help, or so it seemed. Then came the break. Police tracked Quake's movements through his phone. His location data put him in the exact area where Sydney's phone had last pinged. Then her body was found, in a shallow grave, not far from where Quake farmed. He confessed, said he hit her with his truck accidentally, panicked, put her in his vehicle, assaulted her, buried her, just like that. The man who hugged Maggie, who helped with the search, who acted like a friend, had murdered her daughter. The confession stunned everyone, but it only scratched the surface. Because what Quake Llewellyn did next was even more horrifying. He didn't just hit her in panic. That was a lie. Prosecutors believed it was premeditated. He had seen Sydney running before. He knew her routine. He had watched her, waited, planned. When he saw her that day alone on that stretch of highway, he made a choice. He turned his truck around, hit her deliberately, then took her body. What he did afterward was unspeakable. And yet, he went home, went back to work, joined the search efforts, hugged her grieving mother, slept in his bed while the rest of the town stayed awake, praying she was still alive. When detectives brought him in, Quake tried to minimize what he had done. Claimed the hit was accidental, blamed dust from the road for not seeing her, but the evidence told a different story. His truck had a dent, blood on the tailgate. Surveillance footage showed inconsistencies in his story, and then there were the clothes. He admitted placing the clothes he wore that day into a laundry basket at his mother's house. Police found them. A black shirt with blonde hairs, a pair of black and pink shorts. DNA would later confirm everything. Sydney had been sexually assaulted. Blunt force trauma was the cause of death. The community was devastated. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a betrayal. Quake was no outsider. He was from Grubbs. His family had deep roots there. His father ran thousands of acres of farmland. They were once named Farm Family of the Year. People knew them, trusted them. The fact that he had killed someone they all loved felt like a personal violation. Sydney wasn't just a face on a poster. She was vibrant, loud, loving. Her laugh filled a room. She lit up the ER where she worked. Her patients adored her. Her nieces called her Aunt Sassy. That's who this town lost. Her family organized vigils. Hundreds came. Candlelight flickering in the dark as if trying to bring her light back. But nothing could undo what had happened. As the trial loomed, new charges were added. Rape, kidnapping, abuse of a corpse. Quake pleaded not guilty, but the mountain of evidence kept growing. One anonymous source told authorities that Quake had a disturbing past, that he had tried to spy on women changing clothes, had a history of peeping, obsessive behavior, even rumors of harming animals. His wife, blindsided by the arrest, filed for divorce. She had no idea who she was married to. Investigators believed this wasn't panic. It was deliberate. They theorized he had seen Sydney jogging and made a calculated decision. A decision that ended a life, shattered a family, and left a permanent scar on a peaceful town. The trial was set to be grueling. The Sutherland family prepared for the long haul. But then came a twist. A plea deal was offered. The death penalty would be taken off the table if Quake admitted to capital murder and rape. Sydney's family agreed. Not because they wanted leniency, but because they needed closure. Her mother, Maggie, said they couldn't go through years of courtrooms, appeals, and public reliving of their nightmare. They wanted justice, but they also needed peace. Quake accepted the deal. In court, he stood and admitted what he had done. No emotion, no remorse. Maggie gave her statement. She looked him straight in the eye. Told him he had no right to take her daughter. Told him the hands that hugged her were the same ones that killed Sydney. And then she said what no mother should ever have to say. Did she cry? Did she ask for her brothers? Was it worth it? The courtroom fell into a suffocating silence after Maggie's words. Her voice trembled, but her stare never wavered. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She told Quake that from now on, he would be just a number. No name, no identity, no legacy, just an inmate behind concrete walls wearing his shame like a uniform. The judge handed down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. No appeals, no second chances. It was over. But for Sydney's family, it wasn't closure. It was survival. They had endured 408 days of uncertainty, of fear, of grief. And now they had to learn how to keep living in a world without her. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked if they felt justice had been served. Maggie answered simply, "True justice would be having my daughter back." And how could anyone argue with that? The town of Grubbs mourned in waves. The pain came in surges at the grocery store where Sydney used to shop, on the roads where she ran, in the hospital hallways she once filled with joy. Her friends wore pink to honor her, her favorite color. Runners across the state started something called Finish Sydney's Run, an 8 19-mile journey, the same distance she never got to complete. People from all over Arkansas participated, tagging others on social media, passing the baton of remembrance. With every mile, every step, they whispered her name into the wind. Her friend Danielle said it best: her spirit is soaring through every run. Sydney's legacy didn't end in that field. It kept moving, kept breathing, in the lives she touched, in the stories told by her friends and family, in the scholarships created in her name for nursing students at Arkansas State University. Her bracelet, once scattered bead by bead on the roadside, was now whole again. One bead recovered by Maggie during the search, now worn around her wrist like a vow. And still, there were questions. Why did Quake do it? Was it impulse or obsession? Had he planned it for weeks? Why Sydney? Why then? Some speculated he had fantasized about her. Others believed it was an opportunity crime. He saw her. He acted. Cold. Calculated. But the most disturbing truth might be that he didn't have a reason. That evil doesn't always come with a motive. Sometimes it just exists. In one chilling detail, a psychologist later revealed that Quake had told him he tried to block out the murder from his mind, that he just went back to his routine as if nothing happened. He didn't confess out of guilt. He confessed because the evidence was overwhelming, because he had no other choice. He didn't feel sorry, he felt trapped. Prosecutors knew that if the case went to trial, the family would be forced to relive everything in graphic detail. The plea deal gave them something no verdict could an ending. Not justice in the purest sense, but finality. Sydney's boyfriend's mother, Amy, said she didn't want the death penalty. She wanted him to live, to suffer, to be reminded every single day of what he did. She said the death penalty would be too easy. That real punishment is living with yourself. Her husband agreed. He said evil shouldn't be given a quick exit. It should rot, it should decay, in prison, alone, forgotten. Sydney's mother chose strength over vengeance. She told Quake that she would never forgive him, but she would not let his darkness define her life. Evil will not take me down, she said. I will let go of the hate, but I will never forget. A quiet resolve, a mother's defiance, a line drawn in grief. In the days that followed the sentencing, Grubbs felt different. The same streets, the same faces, but something had shifted. The trust that once blanketed the town like morning fog had thinned, because Quake Llewellyn wasn't a stranger. He was a neighbor, a familiar handshake, a wave from a pickup truck, and now a killer. The shock wasn't just in what he did, but in who he had always pretended to be. His family had been respected deep roots in the farming community. Awards. Photos in the local paper. No one had seen this coming. Or maybe they had. Quietly, in whispers, anonymous sources later told police that Quake had long exhibited disturbing behavior. Peeping into windows, fixating on women, watching teenage girls. Some said they brushed it off as weird. Others said they were too afraid to speak up, and so it festered. In silence, in the shadows, until one day it exploded. Investigators believe that what happened to Sydney wasn't spontaneous. They think it was the culmination of dark urges left unchecked for years. And Sydney kind, trusting, radiant Sydney was the target of that explosion. The Arkansas State Police reconstructed the timeline. They believe Quake was driving westbound on County Road 41 when he saw her jogging. He turned around, accelerated, and struck her intentionally. Then, as she lay injured or unconscious, he abducted her, took her to a remote field, assaulted her, murdered her, and buried her like trash. In the same soil where his family grew crops, where people in that town made their living. That's where he left her. But the town didn't let her memory die. At Highway 67 and State Highway 167, near County Road 41, the overpass was renamed the Sydney Sutherland Memorial Overpass. A symbol, a reminder. Every time someone drives over it, they remember the girl who ran with joy and never made it home. Her family is now working to build a foundation in her name, a scholarship to support future nurses. Because Sydney was more than what happened to her. She was her mother's best friend, her niece's superhero, her boyfriend's light, her community's joy. And even in death, she's saving lives. That's her real legacy. Not the brutality of her final moments, but the beauty of her entire life. Friends of Sydney launched social media campaigns like #FinishSydney'sRun. People from around the country joined in, running the distance, wearing pink, sharing her story. One woman said she ran not just for Sydney, but for every woman who has ever felt unsafe in her own town. For every woman who went for a run and didn't make it home. The symbolism was powerful, because Sydney never got to finish her run, but others would finish it for her. Step by step, by mile. A community moving forward, not forgetting. Her mom, Maggie, still wears the bracelet with the white bead she found during the search. A single bead from a scattered trail. A symbol of holding on, of refusing to let go, of piecing back together something the world tried to shatter. That's the story here. Not just of a crime, but of the resilience that follows. Of a town choosing love over fear. Of a mother choosing strength over hate. And of a legacy that refuses to be buried. Because the most powerful truth is this: while Quake Llewellyn now rots behind bars, Sydney Sutherland still runs. In memories. In footsteps. In every heart that refuses to forget. The courtroom chapter may have ended, but the conversation around Sydney's case didn't. Across Arkansas and soon across the nation, people were talking. Not just about Sydney, but about how something so horrific could happen in a place so ordinary. There were town halls, self-defense workshops, community meetings. Runners started sharing their live locations with friends. Women in rural towns adjusted their routines. Questions piled up. Why didn't anyone see it coming? Could he have been stopped sooner? What signs were missed, and most haunting of all, how many other Quake Llewellyns are out there hiding in plain sight? On true crime forums, amateur investigators dissected every timeline, every search effort, every legal move. They raised theories, debated motives. Some questioned if Quake had committed other assaults and never been caught. Others dug into psychological profiles, trying to understand what kind of mind could do something so cold and still show up the next day to help search. It was the classic wolf in sheep's clothing. But here's the thing that chilled people to their bones. It wasn't just that he fooled them. It's that he didn't have to try very hard. He was already trusted, already familiar. He blended in. And that made people uneasy. Suddenly, small towns didn't feel so safe. The idea that you knew your neighbors became something people said with a little less confidence. For Maggie, for Sydney's brothers, for Alex, every day after the sentencing was a balancing act. Grief was no longer a wave. It was the air. It filled the house, the spaces where Sydney used to be. The jokes left unsaid. The texts never answered. The void. Her boyfriend Alex struggled publicly. He had shared 4 years of life with her. Inside jokes, future plans, talk of kids. None of that goes away with the sentencing. For him, time didn't move forward. It spiraled. And Sydney's brothers, Sam and Tyler, who had always seen their role as protectors, wrestled with the guilt that was never theirs to carry. They couldn't have known. No one could, but they felt it anyway. In interviews, they admitted that even smiles felt wrong sometimes. Like laughing was a betrayal, like healing meant forgetting. But they were wrong, and eventually they realized that. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering better, stronger, with purpose. The Sutherland family began working with victims' advocacy groups. Maggie spoke at events sharing Sydney's story, not as a horror tale but as a reminder this can happen anywhere. And when it does, communities must act, not with paranoia but with awareness, with prevention, with vigilance. They advocated for smarter safety technology, emergency response networks, support systems for families in trauma. Because while Sydney's case was resolved in court, so many others remain unanswered, and Maggie, through her pain, became a voice. For every mother still searching, for every daughter never found. The media came calling again. News channels ran retrospectives on the case. Podcasts revisited it. Documentaries were proposed. Some painted it as a cautionary tale, others leaned into the psychological horror. But Sydney's family made one thing clear: this was not a story about a killer. This was a story about Sydney, who she was, what she gave, and what she left behind. Not just a tragedy, but a legacy. In her hometown, there's now a bench with her name, a quiet place where people sit, reflect. Some leave flowers, others just sit in silence, but all of them feel her there, because Sydney never really left. Not in the ways that matter. Her light was stolen but not extinguished. In the aftermath of justice, something else began to take root. Not closure, because closure is a myth, but transformation. Sydney's story sparked conversations in every corner of the state. Schools hosted safety workshops. Churches held seminars on trauma and grief. Survivors of violence, many for the first time, came forward, told their stories, said her name. Because Sydney wasn't just a victim, she was a mirror reflecting something bigger. That this could happen to anyone. That the face of danger isn't always someone in the shadows. Sometimes it's the guy at the feed store, the man you wave at on a tractor, the one who went to high school with your cousin. In Grubbs, things changed. People double-checked doors, shared locations. Fathers taught their daughters not just to be kind, but to be alert. Mothers spoke more openly about intuition, about gut feelings that should never be ignored. Because Maggie's words still echoed. Something felt off. And next time someone might listen. The justice system too felt the ripple. Prosecutors and judges began pressing harder in rural cases involving women. They cited Sydney's case in closing arguments, advocated for more psychological evaluations. For law enforcement, it was a wake-up call. Not every predator wears it on their face. Some smile, some offer help, and some, like Quake Llewellyn, offer hugs while hiding horrors. The plea deal remained controversial. Some wanted the death penalty. Others felt life behind bars was worse. But what everyone agreed on was that Sydney's story had power. Power to scare, to move, to change. True crime communities online kept the case alive. Reddit threads with thousands of comments analyzed timelines. TikTok videos dissected his confession. Podcasts featured interviews with locals offering theories about red flags, missed systems that failed. But there was one constant Sydney. Her photo, her smile, that unmistakable energy captured in a frame. She became a symbol not of fear, but of what's worth protecting. Her scholarship fund grew rapidly. Donations came from people who had never met her, people who only knew her through a headline or a post or a video. But something in her story hit home, because Sydney had dreams, to help people, to care for others. And even though her life was stolen, that dream lived on in the nurses who now walk into hospital wings with her name on their scholarships. And then there was Alex, her boyfriend. He stayed out of the spotlight mostly, grieved quietly. But in one rare interview, he said something that stopped people cold. He said, "Every morning, I still look at the door just for a second, like maybe she'll walk in. That second ruins my whole day. But I wouldn't trade it for anything because it means she's still with me, just for a second." It wasn't poetic, it was real. And that's what this case became. Not just a headline or a cautionary tale, but a very human wound. Raw, visible, felt, across a town, a state, and far beyond. In 2021, the state legislature passed a bill nicknamed Sydney's Law, focused on improving coordination between agencies during missing persons cases in rural areas. It wasn't just political, it was personal. It was a promise that the next time someone went missing on a quiet road, things would move faster, smarter, that the silence would be broken sooner, and that maybe, just maybe, another Sydney would make it home, because that's all anyone wanted. Not revenge, just to undo what was done, to rewind time, to change the ending. But since they couldn't, they chose to change the future. Today, Sydney Sutherland's story is still told not in whispers, but out loud. In classrooms, on running trails, on social media, not as a tale of horror but as a warning and, more importantly, as a call to pay attention. Because Sydney was not naive. She didn't put herself in danger. She didn't make a mistake. She was just living, going for a run. On a road she had run 100 times before. The kind of routine that makes you feel safe. The kind of routine predators watch. That's the part that never gets easier for people to hear. That Sydney did everything right, and still, it wasn't enough. That's why her case resonates so deeply. Because it could have been anyone. Any woman, any daughter, any friend. And it reminds us all evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles. It volunteers to help. It tells you everything looks normal. And sometimes it hugs you while hiding what it's done. That's what Sydney's mother carries with her. Not just the loss, but the memory of that hug. That awful moment when she was comforting the very man who had just buried her daughter. It haunts her. Not because she should have known, but because she trusted. That betrayal doesn't fade. It hardens. It changes how you see the world. But Maggie chose not to let it consume her. She turned her grief into movement, into advocacy, into light. She said once that she wakes up every day and talks to Sydney, tells her what's going on, tells her about the people running in her name, the kids going to nursing school because of her, the pink shirts, the vigils, the foundation. She would have loved this, Maggie says. She would have been right in the middle of it. In a way, she still is. Her friend Melanie put it best. She said Sydney was what every human secretly hopes to be. Kind without needing applause. Loyal without conditions. Fierce when it mattered. And unforgettable, always unforgettable. For Quake Llewellyn, there is no redemption. No epilogue. No second act. He will spend the rest of his life inside prison walls, and even that feels like a fraction of what he took. His name is already fading, his face forgotten. But Sydney's, that name is rising. Every year on August 19th, people run. Not just in Arkansas, all over the country, 8.19 miles for Sydney, to finish what she started. To say, we didn't forget. And to tell the world that her life mattered, not just in how it ended, but in how it was lived. That's how you beat the darkness. You don't just survive it, you outshine it. So here we are, a small town, a tragic crime, a mother's unimaginable loss, but also an unbreakable community, a movement born from heartbreak, a spirit that refuses to stay buried. Sydney Sutherland's story could have ended in a field, in silence, in statistics, but it didn't, because people stood up, spoke out, kept running, kept remembering, and kept building something better from the ashes. In a world where stories like this happen far too often, Sydney's stands out not just because of its tragedy, but because of its echo. The echo that says we will not forget. We will not be silent, and we will never stop running with her, for her, until every Sydney out there makes it home.
So that's how crimes end, and if you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you want me to do some special crimes in all over the world, comment down below, or you can send us direct through email, and I will see you in all my videos. See ya!